Well, to discuss this, I'm joined now from Beirut by Jamal Ghosn. He's a former managing editor of Akhbar daily newspaper. In London, we have Rakib Ehsan, a research fellow in the Center on Radicalisation and Terrorism at the Henry Jackson Society. And Afzal Ashraf is an expert in terrorism and global security at Nottingham University, as well as a former counterinsurgency and political specialist in Iraq. Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us. Rakib Ehsan, let me start with you. So, the government has criminalized essentially a third of the Lebanese government and said that Hezbollah's political wing is also terrorist. Is that helpful?
I think that when looking at that question, you have to really consider the current social climate in the United Kingdom in regards to anti-Semitism. The British Jewish community increasingly feels socially unsafe. They also feel politically abandoned. They don't have much, currently, levels of faith in the political system in terms of tackling anti-Semitism is currently at an all-time low. So in this context, you have to really consider Hezbollah's ideology and how that really fits in with the decision to prescribe Hezbollah in its entirety as a terrorist organization.
Okay, so Jamal, forget Syria, forget what's happening in Lebanon, forget the geopolitics of the Middle East. What's happening in the UK, according to Rakib, is that there's a culture of anti-Semitism. Hezbollah is anti-Semitic, and that's why this government is deciding to ban them. How do you feel about that?
First of all, I mean, if we forget about Israeli occupation in the region, if we forget about Israeli aggression against Lebanon, continuous aggression, and we want to look at the world from a very UK-centric point of view, then we should just ask what the British want to do and just follow suit. But that's not, obviously, there are a lot of factors that go into consideration here. We're looking at a party that's part of the Lebanese government. A large part of the population in Lebanon supports Hezbollah and thus have been basically declared criminal by the UK government. And it's also a very vague law that we'll have to wait and see if they ever, or who will they prosecute under this law. It will probably end up being someone retweeting something or other comment from a Hezbollah politician or something in Birmingham or Manchester. So from that point of view, it's a very UK-centric view of the world. But there, I mean, I guess they're used to impose their views on the world, but in this case, it's just they're overreaching, really.
Okay, so the deed is done, Jamal. Sajid Javid has done it. They're on the list. I wonder, does Hassan Nasrallah care?
I mean, I can't speak for Hassan Nasrallah, but I'm pretty sure a resistant movement that was created to fight Israeli occupation in Lebanon, and we all know the history that the UK played in the establishment of the State of Israel. I think the last thing he thinks about when he wakes up in the morning is how to make Sajid Javid happy. So I would say, no, he doesn't really care.
Okay, Afzal, let me ask you, is this because of domestic considerations, culture of anti-Semitism, as Rakib has said, alleged anti-Semitism on the left with Labour and Corbyn and so on, and I guess also a way to send a message to the likes of Jeremy Corbyn that this Tory government is different? Is it that in the UK, or is it about geopolitics in the region and the Israelis and the Americans and the Gulf Arab countries trying to twist the UK's arm to be on side? Which one is it more of?
I think it's probably more of the global politics. I'm not aware of this being an issue. It certainly hasn't been an issue of debate internally in the UK. So if it had been, then the Conservative government, which is in a very difficult situation with Brexit, would certainly have built up a momentum against Hezbollah on the back of this claim of anti-Semitism, but none of it has really appeared in public debate. What we do see, of course, is the recognition that the war against Daesh in Syria has come to an end. The reasons for the US being there and supporting what in many other analyses has been described as regime change in Syria is moving away. So what many analysts have suggested is that the regime change was being primarily motivated to drain the support that the Syrian regime had provided to Hezbollah. Hezbollah is an organization that more than any other in recent times has constrained Israel both politically and militarily, certainly in northern Lebanon for the last decade and a half. And so we can understand that it's in Israel's interest to weaken Hezbollah, and it's also in the interest of Israel's friends in the West in order to facilitate that. And I think it's probably in that context that this decision is being made or suggested by the Home Secretary.
Okay, so Rakib, isolate Iran, isolate Assad, weaken Hezbollah, strengthen the Israelis, strengthen the Sunni Gulf Arab states. That's the geopolitics of it, isn't it?
I think for me, if I'm being perfectly honest, I think, you know, we've heard terms such as UK-centric so far. The reality of the matter is the Home Secretary, his priority is to ensure the security and welfare of UK citizens, and that includes the British Jewish community. Now, the reality of the matter is Hezbollah has a clear anti-Semitic character. The British Jewish community increasingly feel socially unsafe. There's a recent survey by the EU's Agency on Fundamental Rights, which showed that in comparison to the survey which took place 6 years ago, up to 90% of British Jewish people feel more unsafe. They feel that anti-Semitism has increased. Up to 30% have actually considered leaving the UK for fears over their safety. So in terms of talking about this not being on the agenda, I think the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, he's raised this as an issue when Amber Rudd was Home Secretary. And I think, to be perfectly honest, I think it's one thing that the Mayor of London has done exceptionally well on. And all in all, when you look at the military wing, political wing, this has become increasingly difficult to differentiate when looking at the organizational structure.
Help me understand. Okay, so help me understand, right? So you have, I don't know, pro-Palestine rallies. What's the problem? Hezbollah flags at those rallies, Hezbollah slogans. What's the connection between clear anti-Semitism and harm that might come to the Jewish community and banning Hezbollah? Tell me.
I think the reality of the matter is you have to take into consideration the social developments and political developments which have taken place in the UK. The Home Secretary, the clue is very much in the office of the name of the office. He has to look at home affairs. He has to look at things that are happening domestically on the social and political front. And the reality of the matter is Hezbollah, they are of a clear anti-Semitic character. So the decision to prescribe them as a terrorist organisation, I feel, is a welcome one. And all the UK is doing is following in the footsteps of other advanced liberal democracies such as Canada and the United States.
Jamal?
He's insisting that Hezbollah has an anti-Semitic character. And, I mean, the Home Secretary here declared them a terrorist organization. So here we have, we need, I mean, proof of any attacks that Hezbollah have perpetrated against Jews in Europe or in the UK. There haven't been any. This is a
so you
imaginary
have to wait
threat.
Until a terrorist organization.
He's just pandering. He's just pandering. Sorry.
Go ahead, Jamal.
So you have to wait until
he's just pandering to the right wing in Javid has Sajid Javid has now he's eyeing the prime minister job, and he's pandering to the right wing in Europe and the pro-Israeli lobby in the UK. And this is why he did that, because the threat is imaginary. There was never any attack. There will never be an attack. This is like warning against, I don't know, unicorn gorings and promising to attack those and calling them terrorists. They never happened. So he's just pandering to the pro-Israeli lobby, trying
you have the luxury of saying that you're not Home Secretary for the United Kingdom.
Theresa May. No, and I would actually, if I was, I would worry more about real threats, such as the stabbings that have been taking place and targeting young people all over the major cities there. These are real threats. These you've had dozens of people killed by stabbings from
let's give Rakib a chance.
Erupting.
Okay, fair enough, Jamal. Rakib, come in.
No, I mean, I think ultimately there's a bit of whataboutery going on, you know, bringing in issues such as knife crime. You know, the mayor also has, the mayor of London, for example, has a responsibility to ensure that the capital's Jewish community also feels safe and they feel that they belong in the capital in which they live in. So I think that mixing different issues, talking about other people's political ambitions, I don't see it as pandering to the right wing to prescribe a organisations, to prescribe an organisation such as Hezbollah, to talk about that, that would only command the support of the right-wing fringes of British society is simply untrue. I think you'll find that many British Muslims would find that anti-Semitic political messages, which often come out of the Hezbollah organisation, they would find that they would be appalled by that. So the idea that this is just simply pandering to right-wing fringes, and it's quite frankly, I don't believe that. I don't buy that at all.
Can you list some of these statements that you're talking about that don't exist?
I think the idea that you're trying to deflect the fact that this not... So would you say that personally, Hezbollah, there is an anti-Semitic strand to Hezbollah's organizational ideology? Would you say that right now?
No, there isn't. There is a resistance against Israeli occupation,
then I'm sorry,
which is very
we have to disagree
different.
on that. We would absolutely disagree on that. I feel that Hezbollah is clearly an anti-Semitic organization, and so we'll agree to disagree on it.
There is a problem right now with the right wing in the UK, which is basically it's going to become like the boy who cried wolf. They're throwing this anti-Semitic smear against people who have not been anti-Semitic. For God's sake, they accuse the most anti-racist person in the UK right now in politics, and like Jeremy Corbyn, of being anti-Semitic.
Okay,
this is ridiculous.
Because he's been incredibly relaxed in addressing anti-Semitism within his party.
Okay, so let me grab a hold of this and pause this for a second, right? Rakib believes Hezbollah is anti-Semitic. Jamal disputes that. Let me go to Afzal and go back to the policy itself and the decision that's been made. Whatever the roots of the policy, whatever the justifications for the policy, and we haven't got a whole lot of explanation coming from the Home Office. That's why there's a bit of speculation as to whether it's geopolitics or domestic. Whatever that might be, Afzal, is it the right or wrong decision to make? Is it going to harm Britain's interests?
Well, I think that's a very good question, and it's a question that needs a lot of thought, and it's not one that can be answered very briefly. But one thing that I will say is that the reason why the Home Secretary is involved in this decision is that once an organisation is prescribed within a country, then certain measures can be taken against it. One of those measures, of course, will be financial, and sanctions and other things can then be put into place against Hezbollah. The big problem here is that as you say, putting the rights and wrongs of Hezbollah's behavior aside and putting the rights and wrongs of any interest that might be there, is that many of these measures do not always work, and certainly increasingly don't work. And when they do work, they have unintended consequences. What I mean by this is if very harsh sanctions were put in place, not just by the UK, but by the international community, against an organization which, for whatever reason, is supplying about a third of the services in terms of health, education and other services to the people of Lebanon, which is helping to bind a country together which was in previous situations at war with a very long, bloody civil war. What might happen is, on one hand, you might get the Lebanese population actually uniting and supporting Hezbollah. On the other hand, if these sanctions or these measures, political measures work, it might actually fragment the country and we might have a resurgence of civil war. What we might also have, as we have seen in other conflicts, is a major displacement of people. If the country comes to its needs, then we will get migration, we will get asylum and other issues that will affect Europe. There may well be better, more positive ways to achieve the interests of the nations within the region. And that may well be to learn from organizations such as those that were involved in the overthrow of Slobodan Milosevic in Serbia, and provide positive help for the opposition to Hezbollah in a much more constructive way. So my answer to your question in a simple sense is that the measures that might be put in place for whatever reasons don't always work, and they don't always have the intended consequences. And what we need is a much more creative and probably a much more positive way of displacing the nefarious or unwanted influences of Hezbollah in the region.
Something for the UK to mull over. The Lebanese president is a
indeed.
staunch Hezbollah ally. Lebanese army coordinates with Hezbollah. Hezbollah controls 3 ministries, and if you add its allies together, 70 of the 128 parliamentary seats. All prescribed now as terrorists. It's going to be fascinating to see how the UK deals with that in terms of policy moving forward. Gentlemen, I've got to move on to another segment. I thank you all for joining us. Jamal Ghosn, Rakib Ehsan, and Afzal Ashraf. Thanks again.